I'm Danny Tan from the California Energy Commission. I'm pinch hitting for Commissioner McAllister today, so if you're expecting him, sorry. I work in the Building Standards Office. My main focus is water heating, but I also help wrote the language for the PV requirement and the new Joint Appendix 11 and 12. So this was some of our original goal when we started the 2019 process. First and foremost, as always, we want to increase energy efficiency as much as possible, cost effectively. And we want to do it through our building standards to contribute to the state's GHG reduction goal and ZNE goal. Third, we really want to start minimizing the impact of houses on the grid. We want to do that by introducing PV and something we call grid harmonization technology. Also, we want to remove any existing barriers to electrification. And I think we accomplished all these goals for the 2019 standards. This was some of these original policy driver. Started back in 2008 with Governor Schwarzenegger. We had a zero net energy building goal, 2020 for residential and 2030 for non-res. A lot of things changed since then. We don't really talk about ZNE anymore. It's kind of migrated to decarbonization, electrification. But these original goals, it did set us up nicely for where we are now. So here's the infamous duck curve. Most people already probably seen. This is a Cal ISO graph. It's an actual day in March. This is what the California grid saw. So it's a mild day, so it's not a lot of cooling, but there's still a lot of good production from PV. So you can see as the year goes on, we add more PV to the grid. So there's too much PV going on. So more and more there's just way oversupply of PV to the point that we need to give away electricity to Arizona for free. And then what happened when the sun goes down? Everyone went home, they start taking a shower, start cooking. So there's all this ramping. So in drafting our standards, we're very aware of the situation. We want to avoid making the situation worse as much as possible and try to smooth out that duck curve. So we introduced this concept called grid harmonization. What it means is any technology or techniques that maximize benefit to the grid, the customer, and the environment by minimizing export to the grid and maximizing self-consumption from the PV system. What we mean by that, the most obvious example is battery storage. In the middle of the day, back in the duck curve, instead of exporting to the grid, you can charge a battery storage using that excess electricity and start using your battery during the ramp. And it doesn't have to be a battery. With the 2019 standards, the building is very efficient. So we're building a thermos, right? So what you can also do is maybe pre-cool your building during the bottom of the duck curve, and your house could possibly coast through the peak. So you're not using any electricity during the peak. So that's the idea. So here's what that might look like. This is a graph of actual day using our simulation software in the 24-hour period. The red graph is 2019 standards house that has a PV system. So what the red graph is saying is what the grid sees from the house. So anything above zero is drawing some electricity from the grid. Anything below zero is exporting. So the red graph looks very much like the duck curve, right? So before the sun comes up, the house using a little bit of electricity, and when the PV start producing, it starts exporting to the grid. So the blue line is what happens when we added a battery storage system. So you can see it really smooth out that duck curve. In this case, the battery most likely has some leftover charge from the previous day, so it's just hugging that zero line. So that's what we like to see in the future. So here's the actual changes for 2019, just really high-level highlights. Like I said, we always want to increase efficiency, so the envelope efficiency improved slightly for high-performance attic R19, high-performance wall 0.048 U factor. QII is now a prescriptive requirement, and also the windows improved slightly. And we added PV system is now required. I'll talk about that a little more. We remove any barrier to electrification, and what I mean by that is previously there was a slight penalty when you do heat and water heating. We fixed that, and also for the longest time we didn't have modeling capabilities for central heat and water heater. So we partially solved that. We're still working on that. We added a compliance credit for grid harmonization technology like battery storage and pre-cooling. We just started a credit for heat and water heater that does DR. Like I said, we now require PV systems for each newly constructed low-rise residential building, and that size is based on the annual kilowatt hour of a mixed fuel home. So that's the baseline Title 24 requirement. So obviously, if you have an all-electric house, your annual kilowatt hours got to be higher, but the baseline requirement it stays at the mixed fuel level. I'll get into that. So there are some exceptions. Here's the summary. We have 6 exceptions. So the obvious one, if you have urban infill, there's existing shading, you'll be exempt from the PV requirement. You can have a reduced PV size if you're in climate zone 15, which is Palm Spring Desert. 2- and 3-story houses, you can have a reduced PV size if you don't have enough roof area. Also, development approved before January 1st, 2020, you can have a reduced PV size. And also, if you have a battery storage system, these are prescriptive exceptions. 1 to 5 is also available in the performance software. We don't have number 6 because if you're using performance, you're just modeling the battery. So, sir, to your question, the table on the right is what the PV size requirement is for a 2,700 square feet house. For a statewide average, it's about 2.8 kilowatt. So that's actually a fairly modest size. So in comparison, for retrofit, it's typically in the 7 kilowatt range. That's mostly because the 2019 building is so efficient that the annual kilowatt hour is much lower than an existing house. Like any requirement is in the standards, it needs to be cost effective and feasible for us to put in standards. So we did find that PV are cost effective when it's sized to offset the annual kilowatt hour of the building. So the options for meeting the PV requirement, most obvious is having a PV on the rooftop. So it could be an outright purchase or lease or PPA. The standard is silent on that. So I know a lot of home builders offer at the time of sale the option of you can purchase the PV or you can do a lease. Obviously, you pay more if you purchase the PV, and there's no upfront cost if you do the lease. You just get less benefit. But as far as the standards, we just need the PV there. Also, you can do community solar if it's a system approved by the Energy Commission. SMUD just got it approved a couple of weeks ago, so that will be one of the options as an alternative to rooftop solar. So with the SMUD approval, in order for us to approve the community solar project, it needs to meet all these requirements. So the idea is that it provides a similar energy benefit as a rooftop solar, and it's dedicated to the building for 20 years, and dedicated to the building, not the occupant. So if you move, it stays with the building. It cannot cost more than a non-participant. Like some of these existing community solar program, it actually costs more to participate. So you cannot do that in order for us to approve. So the SMUD program was found to meet all these requirements. So another note is that SMART's program was approved for the life of the 2019 standards. So this might change for 2022, and they would need to reapply if that happens. So I mentioned we're moving barrier to electrification. So for single dwelling units, we have now multiple heat pump water heater options, both for newly constructed addition and alteration. For alteration, even when the existing water heater is the gas, there's now an option to do heat pump water heater. And under performance, previously there's some penalty to do heat pump water heater. Now we moved it. There's a separate baseline when you do gas versus electric. This next one was a red hot item for the last few months. Central heat pump water heaters. For the longest time, we did not have the modeling capability for it. Now we have a partial solution. So before the end of the year, we approved a prescriptive option for the stand and split system. You can use a modular, you can daisy chain them together. So that's been approved. The CBEC software 2019 1.2 was released just last week. So now it has the modeling capabilities for that. So under the prescriptive option, we also allow some PV trade-off for the solar thermal piece. And we are working on adding additional different kind of systems like COMAC and NIO and different configuration. Another big change to the energy budget. Previously, everything is done using TDV. You have a TDV target, and that's all you have to meet for the building. So for a newly constructed building, we switched to EDR target, which is still based on TDV. So there's 3 components. Energy efficiency EDR, which is the EDR from the energy efficiency feature of the building. The second one is solar electric generation. Demand flexibility, that's the contribution from the PV or battery storage. And then combined, you have a total EDR. So for the building to comply to Title 24, you need to meet both the energy efficiency EDR and the total. Addition alteration, we don't have the EDR set up for that yet. It's continued to be TDV. So the EDR score is 0 to 100. It's aligned with ResNet. 100 is 2006 IECC house. And if you have a score 0, that's technically a zero net energy house. So for the 2019 standard, without the PV component, we're at the 41 to 48 range. When you add the PV, it's about mid-20s. So what's nice about that is the standard just set the target, what EDR is supposed to meet, and the builders have the option of, whatever they need to do to get that EDR score. So here's the actual example from our CBEC software. So the first row is the EDR of the standard design. So this is what the building has to meet. The second row is the proposed design for this house. So for this particular example, the standard design efficiency EDR is 48.1. So for this house, it needs to be that score, which it did, with a 46.8. The second component is subtracted from the first, and then you get the final EDR score of 29.4. That's what you have to meet, and this house has an EDR score of 3. So obviously it passes. So what this means, so you have to meet both the efficiency EDR and the total EDR independently. So what this means is you can have a better efficiency building and have less PV and still get to the same total EDR. That's fine, but you cannot have more PV to make it for efficiency. It doesn't go the other way. So that's the idea. So in summary, so the cost of the 2019 standards, we estimate it to be $9,500 with a 30-year savings of $19,000. So just to note that $9,500 figure, $1,000 of that is from the efficiency improvements, and the $8,500 is the PV system, and we assume that it's an outright purchase. Like I mentioned before, if it's a lease, then you don't have to pay that, initial costs. We estimated a mortgage increase of $45 a month with a monthly bill reduction of $80. And between 2005 and 2019 standards, we saw 68% reduction in energy and 52% reduction in carbon. So even though our initial goal wasn't really carbon, it did kind of set us up for carbon reduction. So with that, do we do questions now or later?
We can take a few questions. We have one here.
Hi. So we've started to enforce the standards, and we've been telling people that the solar requirement applies to new ADUs that are built from the ground up. But we've recently been seeing CF1Rs that are specific to ADUs. So are the solar standards meant to apply to new stick-built ADUs?
Yes, this has come up a few times in the last week. Technically they are, but I know there's a bill going through right now that might exempt ADU from the PV requirement. It is a problem that we're aware of. Because the required size is so small, we heard that some installers won't even consider working on them. So it is an issue that we're aware of.
Marin County, thank you.
Hi. My question is about the water heater and the connection, gas or electrical. Do you know anything about the county's, restrictions about the gas and so on?
Certain counties ban gas. Is that your question?
Yeah. So sometimes you push to switch to electrical connection only, and I saw that you mentioned gas and electrical.
That's more of a local level issue, I think. Again, our standard is for the whole state, right? There are some counties that did not ban gas, so we still need an option for gas, at least for now.
Questions in the webinar. The question is the solar inverter required to be isolated in Title 24 for 2020?
We don't specifically state it. Joint Appendix 11 is the requirement for PV systems. All we said in there is that it needs to meet Rule 21. Kind of left it at that.
With the build program coming in, I was curious when the new changes to the central domestic hot water heat pumps will happen so that it aligns with the 1477 rules. So
for the Sandon system, it's already happened. So it's already in the 1.2 software that was officially released last week. So it's official. We already done all the changes to the forms. The other system, like the Comac, and now we're still working on them. We'll add them to the software as we make them work. We have to test them, so that's coming.